Chris Wallach, Steve Moss, Jackie Staples, Shaler Still, and Tracy Treat.
Okay.
And everyone, this is Paul Unger, and he does an amazing job.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's always challenging to do this over a web meeting, and if I could, I wish I was there live to do this makeup session, but I'm going to attempt to record this as well, and this is a makeup session. We're going to go over essentially what we did live a couple weeks ago, and the session is entitled Distraction Time, Task, and Email Management. Today we're going to focus on a lot of the email and task management and talk a little bit about distraction management. But there's a lot to go over, so let's go ahead and dive in. Very quickly, my name is Paul. I'm a guy. I'm from Columbus, Ohio, which you guys know is right here. I was born on this date, which makes me this old. I start my day every day with oatmeal and iced tea. I like to run, cook, firm believer of Windex duct tape. Favorite television shows are Chopped, Smirconish, Hardball, and this new little Netflix series called Stranger Things, which is really fascinating and very 80s retro and fun. I can live off of Diet Mountain Dew and Velveeta and potato chips. Not very long, but while I'm here, I will enjoy it. I love computers and gadgets, which is probably one of the reasons why I'm here talking about technology. In fact, this was my first computer, the Commodore 64. I am definitely afraid of bees and tornadoes. I hate mushrooms and thieves. I started my career as a pizza boy. I went on to frying fish, selling shoes, and then working for our former governor right here. This was like showing up to the set of Benson every day, if you remember the show Benson. And then I went on to law school, and I practiced law doing civil litigation for about 6 years. Now I have a company. I'm based in Columbus. My company is called Affinity Consulting. My passion is teaching lawyers how to use technology and how to automate their practices using a variety of software tools. I have a couple books out. One is PowerPoint An Hour for Lawyers, and the other one is this topic here. That this book is actually in editing, and this is what we're going over today: Tame the Digital Chaos. And that brings us to today. I am a bit of a geek, and I'm here to talk to you about technology and it controlling you or you controlling it. So I like to ask, is technology your servant, or are you a servant to technology? The very technology that was designed to make us more productive, do more, bill more, go home early. You know, you've probably heard that little catchy phrase. I don't know too many people who have actually gone home early. I know they do more, and they probably don't bill anymore. In fact, they probably bill a little bit less, and they're certainly not going home early. And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how we maybe rethink the way that we align ourselves with technology, and how we balance that with client expectations. So I want to do an exercise together, and if you have a piece of scratch paper or a calculator, if you can do the math in your head, that would be great. I want to add up the number of interruptions that you get in the course of a day. So these are my numbers, and I want you to count, even if it's spam that makes its way through and lands in your inbox that you have to process, right? If you have to touch it, I want you to count it. So in my world, it's 145, just approximately. And so jot down or think about that to calculate. The next calculation, we want to add in the number of telephone calls we get during the course of the day. For me, I don't get that many. I only get maybe 10, if that. Walk-in interruptions. So the number of times somebody walks into your office, or if you work in a more public general area with around a cubicle or whatever it might be, people who knock on your wall or your door and comes in and asks you a question. The next, text messages. How many? And I want you to pick all the poisons. So if you get instant messenger on Facebook or some other instant messaging tool, your text messages on your phone, all of them. I want you to add those up. For me, it's actually probably a little bit more than 50 today, but we'll go ahead and run with that number. And then this one's a troublemaker. This one's a big problem, and I want you to tuck this one away. And we're going to come back to this one. I want you to keep this on your radar. They're called email or internet curiosity breaks. You know what these are. You're getting ready to do something. Maybe you don't know quite what to do, and you jump over to email, or you jump over to Facebook or ESPN or CNN, whatever your poison might be. So we call those internet or email curiosity breaks. So for me, actually, it's a little bit less than this today. I'm much more disciplined than I used to be. But we'll just slate 20 for the calculation. And add up that number. Take a moment to add up that number. For me, it's 245. You're going to take that number, and I want you to divide it into 480 minutes. Now, you may work more than that, but that's okay. We have to pick some number. And that totals an interruption for me in my numbers about every 2 minutes. The average American worker gets an interruption every 3 to 4 minutes, and in my experience in doing these programs for lawyers, it's more in tune with this number, probably more like 2 to 3 minutes. But whatever the case, that's a pretty big problem, because we have to work with how we deal with that interruption and controlling actually those numbers as well. All right, now we're going to come back to that here and tuck that number away, and I want to talk about a concept that's pretty important called attention deficit trait. It's a condition. You probably have heard of ADD, right? And sometimes maybe we joke around and we say, "Oh yeah, I'm ADD. I see shiny objects, and I can't focus." What's probably going on there is not ADD for most people statistically. Now, of all the people participating today, maybe one of us has struggled with ADD. ADD is a genetic has a genetic component to it. ADT does not. ADT is purely environmental, and so it's environmentally induced. And the environmental factor that induces attention deficit trait is, in the year 2017, is technology, right? It's the constant connectivity to the world that we have. Many people have referred to it as information overload. It is the constant connectivity of social media. It is living with and sleeping with our mobile devices. It's the 24-hour news network. It's all of those things, and then some, right? It's all the technology that we love so much that we're a bit addicted to as well. But it's a problem. It's a huge problem. It's an epidemic, and the problem is, how do we balance that with the needs of our clients? How do we balance this with trying to be responsive and uber responsive, right? Because there's a mandate that somewhat exists that we want to be super responsive to clients, and there is a way to balance that where we can be very responsive to clients and still control this problem of interruptions and this, in particular, this condition called attention deficit trait. But it's why very smart people underperform. It's why you sit there at the end of the day and you've logged 3 hours of billable time and you've worked 10, and you think, why am I only billing 3 or 4 hours when I feel like I've worked 20 hours? I'm exhausted, right? It's the fog that we operate in during the course of the day when we can't focus, and we think, what do I do? What do I do next? What task do I try to bite off? with all these other things going on, and buzzes going off and beepers and everything else. So let's talk about the distraction piece just a little bit, because it's important in the big picture. We're gonna talk about real distraction management techniques in depth in the next session that I come in live. But I do want to talk about this briefly now. So in 2007, Microsoft conducted studies on their computer programmers, and they found that following an electronic-based interruption, it took them 15 minutes for the computer programmers to return back to the work they were performing at the time of the interruption. Computer programmers have a bit of a challenge in getting into what they call a zone. They require a high degree of focus, and I call it mental gymnastics. And so a lot of us can relate to that in with writer's block, right? If we've ever had to write a long brief or research or an article and we get writer's block. Computer programmers have that on a daily basis with the coding and the programming that they do. Well, I know what you're thinking. If it takes 15 minutes to return back to the work and I get interrupted every 2 to 3 minutes, how can I get anything done, right? And that is the problem. That defines the problem that we are all in. We are getting interrupted every 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and statistically, it takes us at least 15 minutes to return back to the work we're performing. Now, what's fascinating is we know that this problem is getting worse, and we know in the year 2015, studies showed that that number is no longer 15 minutes, but it's 23 minutes. And so there's this whole science out there that's chasing this theory that we are doing damage to our brain, and it's doing long-term damage. We don't know that. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical of that because I think the human body is pretty resilient. I think personally that we have more information in 2015 than we did in 2007, and I think that we're getting older, and I think maybe we're doing some damage to our brains. I don't know, but one thing is for certain: the problem's getting worse, and we're getting more interruptions, and we're having a hard time focusing. That I know for sure. It is fascinating, though. These studies are fascinating. In 2010, Microsoft went on to study this a little bit more, and they fed 4 interruptions per hour, and they found that 40% never even returned back to the task they were performing. And the harder the task, the more likely it was that they would never return back to the work they were performing. So that's a problem. The harder the task, right? And so another way of looking at this is looking at deep level work versus shallow level work. Shallow level work is email, text messaging, maybe conversations on the phone. Deep level work is more the project work, research, writing, and we have trouble with that. And millennials actually have trouble with deep level work. Some of us older folks like me, I'm 47. We have experienced both worlds, and so I don't know what's better. I think maybe that we've had a taste of a period of time in our lives where we have been able to focus, and we did a lot of deep level work. But we need to rein that in, and we need to get control of it because it is an enormous problem. It's estimated that we spend more than 2.5 hours a week looking for lost documents and emails. And so let's talk a little bit about all that in this concept of multitasking. So is multitasking good? If you've read anything about multitasking in the last 10 years, you know the answer to that is absolutely not. In fact, the name itself is not even accurate. We don't multitask. We single task, and we just quickly change the single tasks that we do. And the little bit of multitasking that we do is actually we're pretty bad at it, and it has to be. Studies show that the task that we're performing can't really require much thought. The human brain is not capable of multitasking, and so a very, very small fraction of 1% of the population can actually multitask, truly multitask, and do it decently. Even those people really aren't that good at it. Studies show actually the people that think that the best at it are actually the worst at it. And the more we do it, the worse we become at it. Now, more on that when we talk about distraction management, but let's talk about the internal interruptions a little bit. We talked about external interruptions, but what are we doing to ourselves? This is the number of times the average American worker checks Facebook during the course of the day. So remember I talked about email and internet curiosity breaks? So 21 times. Any guesses on the number of times we check email? So another way of saying that is we take an email curiosity break, or we switch over to our email inbox. Any guesses how many times we do that during the course of the day?
400.
How many?
400 is what I'm guessing.
400.
I would have guessed 100.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Most people actually guess something around 20 or 30. 74 times.
400. I'm like, it's always up, you know?
Yes.
It's always up for me. I look at it like I look at a rearview mirror in my car. It's like,
right.
always looking at it.
So now, any guesses of the number of times we switch tasks on our computer?
Probably the same. What do you mean by switch tasks?
Where you
Oh, there
switch
you go.
from one computer program to another, or one part of a program to another part of the program on the computer. So 564 times. So this is more in line with probably the 400 guess. But this is an enormous problem. So you think about the number of external interruptions. You add the internal ones in there as well, and it's amazing we get anything done during the course of the day. We are mentally exhausted. 9 out of 10 people say it's rude to email during meetings, right? So we try to multitask during meetings. Now there is a difference between the device too. So if somebody's checking their computer, like a full-size laptop, the perception is different than if they're on an iPad, and even more so than if they're on a smartphone, a mobile device, like a phone. And so the perception clearly is, if you're on a phone, that you're doing something personal, even though you may not be. And it looks bad to the client. People do think it's rude, but what's clear is we're not present, right? So that's really the point of this, is that we're not present. And we need to be more engaged, and we need to be more present. And that goes to the multitasking issue. And it's making us appear dumb. It may not be making us dumb, but it is affecting, I think, it has to affect our decisions. In 2005, King's College performed IQ tests on 3 different groups. And one group had no interruptions, the second group had electronic-based interruptions, and the third group was stoned on marijuana. And, yeah, and the group that actually, not surprisingly, the group that had no interruptions scored the best. But the group that was stoned actually scored, on average, 3 to 4 points higher on their IQ test than the group that was not stoned, but had email or electronic-based interruptions.
Seems to be the answer.
So maybe we need to smoke marijuana and mellow out, and maybe, right? So it keeps me from looking at my phone every 2 seconds. Now, this is a problem, right? Our smartphone is a problem. Our mobile device is a problem. If we can't get from our seat to the door without looking at our phone, we may have an addiction. And studies actually show that we do. It's called dopamine. Dopamine is the most highly addictive chemical our body releases. It's the chemical that's associated with any type of addictive behavior, with internet addiction, gambling, food, alcohol, substance abuse, all of the above. And so every time studies show, every time we see our name in a tweet or in a Facebook post, we get a little dose of dopamine, right? And we love it, right? So we get addicted to this type of behavior. It's important for us to realize what's actually going on in our bodies. We're a very task-driven society, right? Species. You've probably done this. You've gotten up in the morning on a Saturday, and you jotted out an errand list, and you set out. You go to the bank, and you come out in your car, and you get your pen out, and you scratch out that you went to the bank, and then you're driving down the street and headed to the pharmacy, and you see the supermarket, and you think, oh yeah, I wanted to stop and pick up some eggs, and so you go, or you run in, you get whatever you buy, you come back out, and you get your list out, and the supermarket's not on your list, and so what do? You probably write it down, right? And then what do? You scratch it off. And why? Why do we do that? It's already done. So why do we do that? It's dopamine. Every time we scratch off something on our task list, we get a little dose of dopamine. That is productive, actually. So depending on the behavior, it can be good and it can be bad. But it is important that we realize what's going on with our phones, with the apps that we choose to participate in, the social media, the addiction that we have to our inbox as well, and we have to realize that we actually there is a chemical process that is going on in our body that's contributing to this, and we can counteract it. So being aware that is going on is important, and then knowing that there's a counteracting chemical called oxytocin, which is important too. So if you've ever studied addictive behaviors, you know that we try to engage in behaviors to counteract that addictive behavior. And counteracting behaviors might be things that release oxytocin, which is a slower release, longer lasting feeling, a good feeling. Oxytocin is associated with hugging, actually with lovemaking. I'll say it too because that's important. With charitable thing, when we do something charitable, when we give money to somebody on the street, when we do something charitable, we work at the food bank, right? When we do things like that, there's a release of oxytocin. So anytime there's a release of oxytocin, it's really a counteracting chemical, and the addictive behaviors that we engage in subside, right? So there are things that we can do, but whatever the case, I think we need to be aware of what is going on, and some of it is going on in our body and we don't even know it. We're not even aware that it's happening, and that's why many people run around like a chicken with their head cut off in their office. They operate in this constant state of chaos, and that is an addictive behavior. They're actually getting little dopamine rushes every time they create a crisis in their mind, right? So how do we combat attention deficit trait? We do it on 3 fronts. First is workplace and personal health. The second, attention management skills. And third, which is what we're going to focus on now, and that's time, task, and email management. It's a methodology. I do want to mention, though, what these other 2 mean a little bit before we get into the time, task, and email management. Workplace and personal health. I'm not an organizational health expert, but organizational health is important. Team happiness, environment, working in a very negative environment versus a very positive environment. Those things are important. Trust of coworkers and so forth. Personal health, we know that we have to get sleep, right? We know that we need to exercise and we need to eat well, and when we do those things, we feel better. Mental health is a huge part of this as well. So those things play greatly into distraction management, and those things need to be addressed too. So I don't want to ignore those, but I'm not going to talk about those in this session because, number one, I'm not an expert in that. Number two, we would be here all day. But it is important that we recognize that. There's a great book out written by Patrick Lencioni, by the way, called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. That's really good. Great book on organizational health. The second front where we attack attention deficit trait are attention management skills, and I'm just going to talk about those very briefly because we're going to dive into those when I come in live. And with attention management skills, I just want to give you a couple tips today, and then we'll, like I said, we'll dive deeper. The first thing is we need to stop multitasking, and I think a better way of saying this, a more productive, proactive way of saying this is that we need to actually practice single tasking. We practice things that we want to be good at, right? So like we practice our golf swing, we practice hobbies and such, piano, whatever those things might be. We practice, and so we have to practice single tasking as well. And one way of doing that is the first, turn off all notifications. We need to do this on our smartphones. We need to do this in Outlook. And so with you guys, you have a little bit of a little different situation that I want to address, and that is you have a very strong expectation in your environment to respond quickly to clients. So this one is questionable depending on the role that you serve in the office and the role that you play. And so I don't want to say just blanket to everybody, turn off all notifications at all times. So I'm going to give you some alternatives and some ways to receive notifications from people who are very important that you need to be super responsive to. So in other words, one way of dealing with this, and I'm not saying that this is the way for everybody there, but one way of dealing with this is to turn off all notifications, the global notifications, and then turn on notifications for just special people by creating rules. If your job is to monitor email all day, maybe you serve in the capacity of more of a receptionist or triage, right, where you monitor email that comes into 3 or 4 attorneys, like you're constantly somebody who's being copied on emails for transactions, and in your role, it is expected that you herd the cats and you forward emails to other people. Then this is not something you can do. Okay, so I want to just be very clear that this is not a black and white issue, and it really depends on the role that you play. Okay, so I'm going to teach you some tools and some ways to deal with this, and then you are going to have to exercise discretion in making a judgment call on what technology you turn off and that you turn on and you enable. But in Outlook in particular, what we typically do out of the box when Outlook is installed on your computer, it alerts you in 4 different ways, right, that an email has arrived. So I want to take a step back in time and let's just paint a picture here, and I want to ask you what you would do if this happened. What would you do if somebody walked through the front door of your office building, right past security, right past your receptionist, right past your assistant if you have an assistant, your door is shut, they beat on your door, they walk right in, and then they just start talking to you, and you're in the middle of a phone call, maybe you're in the middle of drafting a brief or an email, and they just start vomiting all over you, right? What would you do? You would probably punch them. You would probably have them arrested, It is just not acceptable behavior, right? None of that of what I said is even remotely acceptable. But this is exactly what we do in a virtual sense when we give people 4 ways of interrupting them. Every time an email hits your inbox, play a sound, briefly change the mouse pointer, show an envelope icon in the taskbar, display a desktop alert. Really? Do we need to give people 4 ways? Do we need to give people even 1 way every time an email arrives? For some people, yes. So maybe the answer is we turn off 3 of the 4, right? Maybe the answer is we turn off all of them and then we create an Outlook rule for the 4 or 5 special people, or 10, right? But not the 145 emails that arrive for everybody in the world. So we definitely need to be more selective about who we allow to interrupt us, and we certainly don't want to give it to the entire world. So in Outlook, under File Options, Mail, this is where you can control those. I like to turn them all off. Personally, they're all off, right? So by default, these are all checked. And I create an Outlook rule for the 5 or 6 people that I absolutely want an interruption for. And I'll show you how to do that in Outlook here momentarily. But again, like I said before, I don't think this is a black and white issue. I think that you have to do this on a case-by-case basis. You need to do this on your smartphones too, and you have to do it by app. So unfortunately, on an iPhone or an Android phone, it works the same way. We have to open the app itself through the settings. We have to go to the app listing, and we turn on or off the notification for that particular app. It's easy enough because we probably only have 4 or 5 apps that constantly bug us. And here's how you do it on the iPhone. And I've given these PowerPoint slides, by the way, to Sue. And so these directions are in screenshots as well as in the written materials. And this is where you do that on the Android. Under Settings, Applications, the Application Manager, you select the desired app, and then you would deselect Show Notifications. Okay, single tasking. Another great method of single tasking is this technique called the Pomodoro technique. And it's the tomato timer. It's a 25-minute tomato timer. And the idea here is, and we'll dive deeper into this again, but this is something you could do immediately after this meeting. And so here's how it goes. You work for 25 minutes straight. You single task for 25 minutes straight, meaning you clear your desk and you work just on that particular task. And then you take a 5-minute break and you do something relaxing. You don't do email. You don't jump over to email. You don't jump over to that which is causing all sorts of probably fires and stress. You need to do something that relaxes your brain. So go get a cup of coffee, go walk down the hall. Some people meditate. And so the 25-minute number is, by the way, a general number that works for most people. That's when most people start to stray. I know plenty of people who will do this and will go work for 45 minutes and then take a 10-minute break or something like that. So you can adjust that number any way you want, but the idea is that you single task for 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. And if you can squeeze in 3, 4, 5 Pomodoros a day, you will find an amazing increase in your productivity. I do this seminar for I don't know how many people during the course of a year, and when I come back to an organization or a bar association and I talk to people that attended the seminar the year before, they always come up to me and they tell me one of 5 things that just made a big impact in their productivity. And this is always one of them. And it's beautiful because you don't have to read a 50-page or 100-page book. You don't have to configure anything. I mean, all you need is a timer, right? All you need is a timer. So I recommend actually to people that they buy this little timer and they set it on their desk, because it's a great reminder of a really awesome technique. Don't use the timer though, because it ticks and it'll drive you mad. And if you find a tickless timer, let me know, because I've been looking for one for many, many years. But it's an awesome technique, and you can start doing it right away. Okay, more on that when I come in live. The next topic that I want to dive into is the time, task, and email management methodology. Take a little drink of water here. Okay, so let's talk about the big elephant in the room, and that's the inbox. Our inboxes are an enormous problem, and you guys are, some of you are in great shape, some of you aren't in that great a shape with email. I know this from the surveys that you guys filled out, and I evaluated, and from the conversations that I had. Some of you have thousands of emails in your inbox, and some of you process your inbox down to either 0 or 1 to 10 or maybe 1 to 20 every night. So I want to talk about this, the processing of email and tasks, and this problem of having thousands of emails in our inbox, which isn't the place, right? It isn't the place. That we need to stop thinking of our inbox as a task list. When we have hundreds, let alone thousands of emails in our inbox, that is not an effective task list. A task list of thousands of items, no one could ever possibly agree that a list of thousands of items where 99% of them aren't tasks anymore is not an effective task list. So a task list where we have to scroll down pages and pages and pages and pages in order to see the things that we intended to leave in there so we would follow up on them is not an effective task list. There's a much better and effective way of managing tasks and managing our emails. So that's what I want to address now. I don't care what methodology you use as long as you have one. You will see, if you've ever studied any of these, you'll see that I'm more of a disciple of David Allen, Getting Things Done. But I don't care if it's the Getting Things Done methodology or Covey. Mine is actually probably a hybrid of David Allen and Covey and a little bit of Agile. But you may not be familiar with any of them. It doesn't matter. I'm going to teach you a methodology that that I think is based mostly on David Allen than any of them. The problem with these books, though, is that none of them, except for Linenberger, which we see down in the lower right-hand corner, address the technology part. And the problem with that book is that it is way too long, and by the time you get through the second chapter, you want to throw it out the door because you don't have any time to set up all the things that they say. So I want to try to make this easy for you, and I want to teach you. We're going to get our hands dirty. We're going to roll up our sleeves, and I'm going to show you. And I've helped people one-on-one when I was out there as well, and I might have an opportunity to work with some of you when I come out again. But it's a pretty easy methodology. The first thing that we can do is we can start processing our emails faster and more efficiently through the use of what we call auto text entries. We do this for repeat responses, for things that we constantly have to type over and over and over again, or we spend 15 minutes looking for an old email where you know that you drafted the same or similar language, right? You do this all the time already with word processing documents. Why wouldn't you do it with email, where we are drafting more emails today, far more than word processing documents? So you could do this through auto text entries or what they call quick parts. So I'm going to pop over to my Outlook here, and we're going to jump over to my real email. which is always a little dangerous. You never know what's gonna pop into your inbox. Years ago, I was doing an email management seminar, and we had moved our office space, and we had brought gift cards to the spa for some of the people in the office who really worked all weekend and went beyond the call of duty. In the middle of the seminar, and there were probably 150 people there, in the middle of the seminar, in my inbox, I'll switch over to my inbox now. Let's see if there's anything bad in there. No, nothing too bad. So in the middle of the seminar, an email I get from Amy in my office, and the subject line reads, "Boy, you really know how to make a girl feel good." And, and so, of course, the entire audience just starts pointing and laughing, and I'm like, oh my God, no. Anyway, I don't have that interesting in front of a life, but this is my real inbox. You can see I'm not too bad. I've got 25 items, and about 5 of them unprocessed. So let's say I get an email from Barb or Dell or somebody in my office, and they ask me. Here's a better example. Let's say I get an email from an organization that's asking for my bio. I get that a lot, and because I do so much teaching. So instead of looking for my bio in a word processing document or in an old email, I can just type PJUB. I get to the 4th character. You see the little pop-up preview and hit enter, and it inserts my bio, right? So I don't have to go looking for it. In literally 2 seconds, if that, I can have my bio inserted into the document. So we all have, into the email, we all have responses that we constantly retype, right? And so instead of doing that, we can automate that through the use of auto text entries. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. We'll create an auto text entry for, we'll just say John C. Smith, okay? And so the idea here is you go find the text, paste it into an existing email, a new email, get it looking perfect in the font that you want and you know looking pretty. And once you have it looking the way you want, then select the text like this, and then you'll go to the insert ribbon, and then you'll go to quick parts, auto text, and then save selection to auto text gallery. Okay, so when we do this, we give it a name, and I'll just call this JCS bio. Okay, and then I'll click OK. Now when I type JCSB, I get to the 4th character, enter, boom. So it's really that easy. You just get the text looking the way you want, select it, and just review this again real quick. Under Insert, Quick Parts, Auto Text, save selection to Auto Text Gallery at the bottom. If you forget what your shortcut is, you can see here I have these here. If I wanted to insert those, I could just use my mouse, and I can just select those, and they'll insert into the email. So you can see I have about 4 or 5 of them that I use. So that can save you time in processing those. The only thing I want to say here is you want to be careful when you switch computers to let IT know that you have these, because they're stored in a little system file that does not get transferred to the new computer unless you go get that system file. So they don't take very long to create. You could probably recreate them in 5 minutes, so it's not the end of the world if you do lose them. Okay, any questions about auto text entries? All right, so let's go ahead and close that, and let's pop back over to the PowerPoint. The next thing is a very important concept called batch processing. We batch process every day. We don't realize that we do this, but if you have any degree of efficiency, I think innately we do this just out of instinct. We do this. When we have to make copies, we typically will save up copies, and then we may go to the copy machine with 3 or 4 things that we need to do at once. That's batch processing. When we go to the grocery store, we go and we buy groceries for a few days, and we come back and we put them away. We don't go to the grocery store, buy oranges, and then go home, put them away, and then go back out and buy milk, right? Now, some of us do that, but we know that that's not efficient. So we can incorporate that same methodology with email. And so we want to check email. Another way of stating this is, remember I talked about email curiosity breaks at the very beginning? Another way of stating this is that we're not going to take email curiosity breaks. We're going to be more deliberate about when we check email. So let's just pause for a moment and let's think about how we balance this with the directive that you guys have to be super responsive to clients. If we don't leave our inbox up on our screen all day long, right, and then how are we going to be super responsive? If we don't have notifications turned on, how are we going to be super responsive? Well, we have to balance that with our ability to do the project work and get work done. And if we're drafting an agreement for a client, if we're trying to do any type of project work at all, and on one screen we have that document, and the other screen we have emails, and those emails are coming in every 3-4 minutes, and it's a bomb, it's a bomb, it's a bomb, it's a fire, right? How do we get anything done, right? So the idea is we've got to strike a balance in managing that information and getting that project level work done. And so generally the answer to that is we minimize our email. We don't leave it up on our other monitor unless that is your job. If that's your job to monitor emails and be super responsive to people, and maybe you don't do billable work and you act more like triage in an emergency room, then that's what you need to do, right? But for the attorneys doing project work, for paralegals doing project work and drafting, we need some quiet time in our head to actually get that work done so we can do it efficiently and accurately. We can get our billable hours in, right? And so the idea there is that we minimize our email and we turn on notifications for special people, right? That we, maybe the 5 or 10 people that we want an interruption from. So but then we are more intentional about when we check email. So in order to be super responsive and do what the department expects you, what the law firm expects you to do, and being very responsive to clients, we need to check email at least on some regular basis. We can't say we're only going to check email twice. You're going to get fired. So we need to check email at more deliberate times, but we're not going to leave it up all day. Okay, so that might mean, depending on you, it might mean every hour. It might mean every 2 hours. Okay, but it's not twice a day, and it's not once a day, and it's not 74 times a day. All right, we have to exercise discretion, and we need to be more deliberate about when we check email. Okay, now one thing that you can do is think about in the morning, and this is an exercise that I do every single morning. I look at my calendar and I decide, and I get an index card out, and I decide those times that I'm going to check email. Sometimes I say, well, I'm going to check it 5 times, and I just spread it out during the day. Sometimes I actually map it out, and I'll put a trigger on my calendar, or I'll write it down on an index card. I'm going to check email at 9, at 10, at 12, at 3, and each time might be different. At 9 o'clock, I might have an hour. At 10 o'clock, I might have 10 minutes. at 1 o'clock, I might have an hour and a half, right? And then tomorrow it's a completely different picture because I have a deposition all day, right? So every day it changes, but we are being deliberate and intentional about when we check it, and we're not taking 74 email curiosity breaks. Okay, so that's the idea behind batch processing email. So when we do check email, we're going to do it in a different way. All right, and here's a methodology that you can. I want you to tweak these things. I don't expect everybody to follow all of these rules rigidly. These are just tools that you can use, and you can choose to use some of them and not use others. But when we batch process email, we're going to follow what we call the 3-minute rule. And the 3-minute rule goes like this. It's going to take you 2 to 3 minutes to read the email, digest it, kind of think about what it is that you're going to do. And the problem is, what we tend to do is we go over to an email and we read it and we think about it and we think, we let it digest and sit and like, I don't know. I'll go on to the next. And then you read it and you think, I don't know. I don't want to deal with it right now. And you go on to the next. So we're wasting 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, right? And at the end of the day, what we end up with, at the end of that time, we've gone through 10 emails and we've done nothing. And so instead of doing nothing, you need to ask yourself, what do you need to do to touch this one time? And this is not a new concept, by the way. This is we did this in the paper world before we did it in the electronic world. When a file lands on your desk, when a piece of correspondence lands on your desk, you want to generally try to touch it once, because otherwise you're going to spend another 2 or 3 minutes reading it tomorrow, and then another 2 or 3 minutes reading it the next day. If you keep going through that exercise of saying, well, I don't know, I don't want to deal with it right now. And so we always need to stop and ask ourselves, what do we have to do to touch it one time? And what we're going to do with that email or piece of correspondence that lands on your desk is one of 4 things, the 4 Ds. Delete, do, delegate, delay. Delete, do, delegate, delay. So delete. We'll come over to my email. All right, we know it's Adam's birthday. Okay, great. Delete. It's an ad that comes in. Delete. I know that I can go through these and delete very quickly the noise that exists in my inbox. The delete's the easiest one. It's the things that you're copied on that you know that you don't need to save within iManage or FileSite. It's just stuff that people have copied you on as a courtesy. It's the happy birthdays. It's the noise, right? And so we do that because out of the 10 emails that landed in our inbox since the last time we batch processed, we can probably eliminate 3 or 4 of them and only be left with 6 or 7. And we know that when we operate from shorter lists, we are always more productive. So you eliminate the noise. You go through and you delete what you can. Do. Do is the easy thing to describe, but it is the hardest thing to execute because it requires many times that you do a little bit of research, that you look something up, that you engage and immerse yourself in the topic so you can resolve it. But we resolve it. We try to resolve it. So we get to an email. Let me pop over to my email, and I'll get, let's open up one. Let's see here. I saved one here. Yeah. So this particular one here, where we're trying to organize a time to meet. So in this email, in order to resolve it, I need to respond. So I need to look at my calendar, and then I need to schedule it, and then maybe either delete it or file it away. So the way that we do this is we have to immerse ourselves in the topic, and we actually have to do it. And we want to do it in a way where we don't produce 5 more emails. So this one I picked very intentionally because she proposes multiple times to meet, and so instead of saying, okay, well, I can meet at 11 or 11:30 or 12, right, then 10 emails later, right, so we're producing more emails than needed. So instead, what you could do is you could drag and drop that email onto the calendar. Okay, now did you know that you could do that? You can convert an email to an appointment, okay, by just dragging and dropping. Let me do that again. Dragging and dropping the email onto the calendar. And then the body of the email, which is very helpful to have, gets embedded into the notes section of the appointment. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to schedule this on February the 1st. Okay, and I'm going to pick 11 a.m. and I will call it Hunger Phone Conference. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to invite this person. Okay, I'm going to send an invitation. And so I'm eliminating the back and forth, the back and forth, and the back and forth. And instead, I'm going to go ahead and schedule it and send the invitation. And now it's done. And now I can probably delete it from my inbox, or I could file it away into the document management system, into the case file. So we actually do it, right? We actually do the do. It is the easiest thing to describe, but it's the hardest thing to actually do, because we need to ask ourselves, what do we do? What do we have to do to touch it once? And when we do touch it once, what can we do to be efficient so that we don't generate 10 more emails in the process? The next is delegate. Okay, so I want to give you an example of delegation. We give so much to other people to do via email. We forward things to people when we ask them for something, or we ask them to do something. And the problem is we have no method in place to follow up on those things that we delegate. And then 6 weeks later, it's not done. We don't know who we gave it to. And that person probably deleted it after 2 weeks because they said, well, if it's important, Paul will ask for it again, or he hasn't asked for it yet, so he probably forgot about it. And that's horrible. That is the worst thing you could do to somebody. And the problem is that we've enabled that behavior because we don't have a system in place to hold people accountable for the things that we ask them for. So here's what we can do. Now, I'm going to take this email we'll just take this, here, we'll take this kind of this junk email, and I'm going to forward this to Dell in my office, and I'm going to copy myself, and I'm going to say, Dell, please do X, Y, and Z. And thanks. And I'm going to put ignore this so she doesn't think I'm stoned or something. Okay, now, when I hit send, you'll notice that this email, that's my document management system popping up. So that's like your file site. When I hit send, even though I copied myself, you'll notice that it didn't land back in my inbox. Okay? So it didn't produce another email. Let me scroll up to show you. It did not produce another. Oh, I got some actual work done during this session. All right, and I didn't produce another email for me to have to process. So where did it go? I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. If I go to my delegated items folder, there it is. Okay, Dell do X, Y, and Z. So what I've done is I've created a safety net to where whenever I delegate or ask for something in an email, and I copy myself on that email, an Outlook rule engages, and it automatically routes that email that would ordinarily be routed into my inbox, and it routes it into a folder called delegated items that now I can follow up on. And I can go here. You can see there's nothing in here because I monitor my delegated items constantly. And so I don't. Otherwise, you don't want to be stuck with thousands of things in here either, right? So this is something that you monitor on a daily basis, the things that you delegate. And you can come here and you can say, oh, I've asked Dell for this, and guess what you can do? Forward, Dell, what is the status of this? Send. Okay? Well, Dell's going to think, Paul, leave me alone. Stop doing this to me. But you get the idea here. This is an awesome technique to follow up on the things that you delegate out via email, which is so much of what we do, and how we delegate items. We ask for things constantly via email. So it's not just delegated items per se. They're things that you've asked for some information and you want some kind of follow-up, right? So you draft a new email, Dell, copy me, research A, B, and C, right? Please get me the medical records for blah, 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 right? And send. Okay, it's not going to land in my inbox. Instead, it's going to land in my delegated items as soon as it processes. So how do we set up the delegated items rule? This is set forth in the book too, but I want to step through it with you. There they are. I'm going to go ahead and delete these. You do that under File and then Manage Rules and Alerts. And here you'll see there's a delegated items rule, and we'll go ahead and create this from scratch together. Okay, but here's how it reads. Apply this rule after the message arrives, where my name is in the CC box and it's from me. Move it to this particular folder called Delegated Items. All right, so let's create this together. New rule. Apply rule on messages I receive. Next. Where it's from a particular person, you. Okay, so you hit people, you find your name in your address book. So when it's from me and my name is in the CC box, next, move it to a specified folder. In the specified folder, when you click specified, if it didn't create it, you can create it on the fly over here with a new button. I'll pick delegated items. Next, no exceptions. Next, delegated, give it a name, and finish. Okay, now I have two of them. I'm going to go ahead and delete the one I just created. But that's it. That's how you do it. Now, just a couple words of caution. If you CC yourself on things now, because maybe a lot of people do this when they're out on their smartphone, they CC themselves, so then when they get back in the office, they can save it into file site from their inbox, or they copy themselves on emails for other reasons. So if you do that, just realize that if you CC yourself currently, if you have a practice of doing that, that this rule is going to change that a little bit, because it's going to be anything you do that on is going to be routed to your delegated items folder. So just be cautious of that. What I do sometimes is I put my name in the to field or the blind copy field if I do want it to land in my inbox instead of my delegated items. Some people have a little hang up with this at first, because they say, well, I don't want my client to see that I copied myself. I can tell you, honestly, I've been doing this for years. And every once in a while, I'll run into somebody and they'll see they'll see me at a seminar usually, and they'll see, oh, that's why people do that, right? So they kind of wonder why they're being why they're seeing themselves. So if it bothers you, maybe you set up a slightly different rule, but I can tell you that it hasn't been an issue, and for the benefit that you get from following up on all of those delegated items, I think that's pretty awesome. Now, so those are delegated items, the delegated items rule. Before we go on to that, I want to show you something else you can do with rules. But before I do that, let me stop and see if you have any questions about that. Okay. All right. So let's go back to the inbox. I told you if we turn off all notifications, okay, if we turn off all notifications, then the problem is in your environment in particular, you have an expectation of responding very quickly to certain people, right? And so if you turn off all notifications, then how are you going to know? Well, you'd have to check email every 10 minutes, and we don't really want you to do that either. So let's say we get an email from an important, let's say you can identify the 5 people that if you get an email from those, you need to respond right away, okay? So I'll create one for Stuart Kenny, okay? If I right-click on that email and then hit Rules, Create Rule, anytime I get an email from Stuart Kenny, then I want to display a new item alert and play a sound. And I can even browse out to my Windows system sounds, and I can find one that may be real dramatic. We'll pick a ta-da. You could play it too, and you can get a little preview. So now anytime I get a message from Stuart, I'm going to get a new item alert, and I'm going to get a ta-da. So that is a way around the problem of turning off all notifications. You can easily set up, I'll do one for Debbie, right-click, Rules, Create Rule. Anytime I get an email from Debbie Foster, play a sound, display desktop alert. So when I get an email from Debbie, it's going to alert me, and I know I can see it, and I can either ignore it or I can choose to actually do something with it. So those are really easy ways to deal with that notification problem. By the way, if we go back to Manage Rules and Alerts, you'll see there they are. So if you want to delete one of those rules at some point, just turn it off, right? You could turn it off, or you can select it and delete it. You can also create rules to route emails. So if you get an email from a listserv, and I don't think I have, we'll do this one from Priceline. From Priceline, see if I get it, let's say I get a bunch of emails from a listserv. I can right-click, go to Rules, Create Rule. Anytime the email is then from that person or the subject contains certain text, and most listservs have static text. Maybe it's the organization's name, something like that. Then move the item to a selected folder. Okay, and so you can have emails automatically routed. So if they're emailing you 10 or 20 emails a day, that's a quick way to automatically route those into those subfolders. Another way that you can handle quick processing of those emails is a function called Quick Steps. And this is spelled out in the book. There's a bunch of different examples, but you can see here, I have a folder over here called Travel. I do a lot of travel, and so that's where when I get my itinerary confirmations, I save them over to that folder. So it's a quick way to access receipts, and I can find information about where I'm going and confirmation numbers. So instead of having to click 4 or 5 times to get it over into that folder, all I do is I created a quick step that will move it to that travel folder. So I just hit move to travel, and boom, there it is. It's done. So it's very easy to do. Under Quick Steps, we just select the little drop-down menu, and we click New, and there's a building block in there called Move to Folder. And so I'll call this Move to Travel. We'll create it again. Travel. And then you pick the folder. So, and then we hit Finish. And OK. Now you'll see, now I have 2 of them. That's fine. And that's just a way to quickly move emails into a folder like that. Now, Quick Steps can actually do multiple steps too. So the neat thing about that, and we're not going to go into detail here, but and that's something I can help you one-on-one when I come back out. But some, like I'll get notifications from the court from the electronic filing that something failed, like failed service of process or something. So I can create a quick step that will actually move the email into a folder that where I want all of those to go, and then secondly, then forward an email to a clerk that can do in the office that can do something with it. And so, and maybe even I have it go to a third place, right? And so in one click of a button, one quick step, I can actually have it go to 3 different places. So those are how quick steps work. Very, very useful. The 4th D, delay. Delay is where we get into a lot of trouble as well. So with delay, this is where we leave it in our inbox, and because we say, well, I don't have an hour to actually respond to this email. I need to do some research. So we leave it in our inbox, and then these things accumulate in our inbox, and before we know it, we have 7,000 items. So there's a methodology to the delay, and for this, I want to take a step back in time to the paper days, pure paper days, when we get an item or a stack of mail, right? And we look at maybe it's a piece of correspondence, and we have to respond to a letter. So the 4 Ds still apply to that letter that lands on our inbox, in our paper inbox, right? We can delete it if it's an advertisement. We can get our dictaphone out, right? We can dictate a letter or response, and then clip the tape to the letter and put it in our outbox, right? So we can actually do. We can also delegate. So we maybe dictate a memo to the file and then clip our little tape, right, in the old days, and we put it in our outbox. Same thing. So in the electronic world, we delegate, and we can perhaps use the delegated items rule. The delay, though, is where we get into trouble. So in the paper world, the wrong thing to do, which we're all guilty of from time to time, is we put it on the corner of our desk and we say, all right, I'm going to get to this later. And I'm going to put it on my desk so I don't forget to do it. And then we get to the next thing in our pile and we put it on that on the corner of our desk, and we just kind of cascade it so we can still see it, and then we have these rows of things that we need to do. And so we're using our desk as a to-do list, right, much like we use our inbox as a to-do list. And when we run out of space on our desk, we create a row on the floor, right? And so that's the behavior. See, technology doesn't solve bad behavior. It never does. Technology never solves bad behavior. We need to fix the behavior. There are tools that we can use to help that, but the answer to that problem is, instead of putting the motion or the correspondence on the corner of our desk that we need to respond to and use our desk as a to-do list, instead what we need to do is we need to record that task on our task list. We need to then record the deadline that it's due. So maybe we get our calendar out, and then we dock it. If it's a pleading, then we have to docket it, and we have the docketing software there, you guys have that you need to docket that in your system. And then you need to file it away in the case file. And then when you're ready to work on it, you go get the case file, right? And so you have a clean desk, and you're not using your task list or your desk as a task list. So in the electronic world, okay, we do it this way, okay? We record the task or to-do. And to do that, we can do that very easily in Outlook by dragging and dropping emails to our task module. So let me show you how that looks. When we do that, the notes come over into the actual task itself. Or even better, let's take this email here with an attachment. If I right-click and drag and drop onto my task module, I can copy it there with the attachment. So in the task itself, I have the email that's embedded with all the attachments. So that's a wonderful way to have very quick access to that reference material. And so then the subject might be, let's say this is related to the John Smith matter. Okay, and then so I put the client name as a prefix, and then respond to motion for summary judgment. And I tend to keep things simple with the task list in Outlook. I will sometimes put a due date in there. So we'll just pick a date in February. And then I might even put a reminder in there as well. Maybe remind me 2 days before at 9 a.m. Okay, and then save and close. And now if I go over to my task list, it's in my task list. And now if it's something that I want to docket, you guys might forward this to your docketing clerk. Okay, so you might do that still in your inbox, and then you might even want to put it on your calendar because it's really important to you. So you drag and drop it, and you put it on your calendar too. Okay, so you may be recording this in 2 or 3 places, and then what do? You file it, right? So in my world, I use a tool called NetDocs. In your world, you use iManage or FileSite, right? So you have a plug-in in FileSite with Outlook where you can save the email into the case file. Okay, and so when you do that, then you can either move it into the case file or you can copy it into the case file. If you move it, you don't have to delete it here. But once it's saved into the case file, then you can delete it out of your Outlook inbox. And so that's how we process the emails, so we don't have emails accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. We don't use our inbox as a reminder mechanism. We use our task list, we record the task in our calendar, or the deadline on our calendar in our docketing system, and then we file it away in FileSite, and then we delete it out of our inbox. Okay. So what a wonderful way to get all that information from the email into the task itself. And then you guys docket it into CompuLaw. You have a clerk that does that. Then you schedule it on your calendar, and even better, you schedule the time to do it too. So you drag and drop it onto your calendar once to put the deadline on your calendar, and then it's still in your inbox. You drag and drop it onto your calendar again, and maybe you block off 3 hours of time a week before, so you get it done, and you set aside the time to do it, so you're not staying up all night the night before, right? What an ingenious idea. We actually schedule time and block time off to do that project work. And then you file the email. You file it, and in your office, you have a wonderful tool called FileSite or iManage, and that allows you to save it directly into the case file where everybody else in the office can see the email. So it's not stuck in your inbox where nobody else can see it. And we all know that creates all sorts of problems and drama. Okay, let me stop there and see if you have any questions about that process. Any questions? Okay. All right. So now, you guys have that foundation for email management, and that's your document management software, and that's FileSite HP. That's this third one here, and it's actually I think it's actually the best of the document management systems. It's really considered to be the Mercedes, and you guys have some really cool abilities to autosave, and it has some deduplication functionality that some of the other systems don't have. So my recommendation when I was there last, and we'll talk about it more when I come out, is that you guys engage in some discussions and meetings about how to use that better, and maybe do like a lunch and learn on FileSite and use that tool a little bit better. All right, now task management. We're going to just touch on this, and we're going to dive into this deeper when I come out, and then do the distraction management stuff. But with tasks, it's really important that we have a task list of some sort. And I'm not a big proponent of paper, but I would rather you have a paper task list than no task list at all. You can see the benefit from using Outlook and email and dragging email over to your task list, because it's so easy to do. You can drag and drop to create those. But studies clearly show that our minds never turn off. And when we don't write down a task on a list, our mind actually goes into more overdrive than it would otherwise if we didn't write it down. And so we continue to worry about it, in other words, at a much higher level and intensity. And that affects our ability to focus. That affects our attention deficit trait. When we don't have our arms around things, you know this to be true. When you get really organized, you clean off your desk and you write out a list, right? And you feel there's this euphoric feeling of like control, where you have your arms around everything. You don't have, it's not that, the fear of the unknown is no longer there, because you know what's on your plate and you can deal with it, and you feel like you have a plan. And now sometimes we don't feel that way. Sometimes we feel, oh my God, I've got 300 things to do. What am I going to do? But you know what I'm talking about. We achieve focus when our minds can relax and stop constantly worrying about the fear of the unknown. And we gain focus and we gain creativity when we have our arms around everything. And so one of the things that's really important to do is that we keep, when we maintain, a task list. And so in Outlook, for me, let me go over to my task list here. You can see here I have, here's my task list. I have travel that I need to book. I have administrative items. I have client work. I have some annual goals that I sketched out. These are my New Year's resolutions, way too many. I have research and writing, business development, and then personal and home. Okay, so this is a master task list of everything that I need to do in all of these different categories of my life. And I constantly contribute to this, and I constantly look at it as well. And I operate from it, and I convert those emails into tasks so I can then go here and then execute on them. So these tasks come from many sources. They come from a master task list. The master task list comes from all of these different sources, from phone calls, from emails, from notes, from sticky notes, and so forth. So one of the things I'm going to talk about when I come out there next is this gathering process that is so important that we do in order to assemble this task list. The last thing that I want to talk about is how we operate from this giant task list that we have. Okay, so as you will see here, and I'm gonna go ahead and pop out of the PowerPoint here and look and show you, this task list has probably hundreds of items. If I look at all the different lists and everything on them, right, I probably have 100 to 200 items on this task list. And so we know from studies that if I give you a list of 100 things today, and I say, okay, go at it. And tomorrow I give you a list of 5 things, and I say, go at it. You are always, 99 times out of 100, going to be more productive when you operate from a shorter list. And so as you start developing this task list that I hope that you maintain in some method, in some way, which we'll talk about when I come out, that you on a daily basis start operating from a short list or a daily list. And a really easy way to do that is through like a note card or to plot it out on your calendar. So in other words, in the morning when you come in, or at night the night before, and when you're planning out your day, you look at your calendar items, you look at your task list, and you say, all right, these are the 3 things, or these are the 5 things that I'm going to do today or tomorrow. And you write them out on an index card, and that is then your roadmap that you follow. Instead of when you think, what do I do next, you decide, I'm going to jump over to email. Instead, whenever you have the urge to go over to email, you go over to your daily task list. Or you go over to your calendar, if you plotted it out on your calendar, and those are the 5 things or the 3 things that you are going to do that day, that you're going to at least try to do that day, right? We live in a hair on fire world, and I realize that we have emergencies that land in our laps. Okay. I'm going to stop there. That's about where we stopped in the first group. I want to stop there and see if you have any questions at all, and anything you want me to go over again. And I will shut up. Sue, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, I think that's it, Paul. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Sue, I will. I'll get you the recording of this as well, and then I'll see you in. Is it a couple weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thank you all very much for your attention today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.